Aisha Stewart. Patrick Martez Walker is a convicted felon who escaped from the Payne County Jail in Oklahoma in November of 2018. He escaped by posing as his cellmate, who allowed him to use his identity because he'd threatened his family. So, when guards came, he tricked them into being freed. He had two of his girlfriends arrange bail for his cellmate, then simply walked straight out of the prison pretending to be someone else. As soon as he was out, he met up with his other girlfriend, Babyfaced Aisha Stewart, and they went in the direction of St. Louis. The pair vowed that they wouldn't be taken down without a fight. But they were certainly an odd pair. Patrick was 35, a hardened criminal and a convicted murderer. And Aisha was just 21 years old and had the face of a baby, what some might describe as angelic. Yet, according to investigators, the pair had one main thing in common. Both of them were positively ruthless. A law enforcement official told the Oklahoman that Patrick liked Aisha because she was just as ruthless as he was. When the cops finally caught up with the duo, they were planning to battle it out to the death. They told all their friends that if the cops caught up to them, they would participate in a shootout. 5 days later, though, when that day came, nothing happened. U.S. deputy marshals arrested the pair at a motel in St. Louis without incident. The murderer and his girlfriend with a baby face were subsequently taken straight to jail. 9. Muqaddam Ali Farah. On May 15, 2017, Muqaddam Ali Farah murdered Abdirahman Adam, the 18-year-old baby-faced killer, who didn't look anything like what you'd expect a criminal to look like, committed the murder with a knife. It's about as personal of a way to kill someone as you can get. Muqaddam also committed the heinous act in the middle of the day, in broad daylight on a busy street. It came up in the court proceedings that in the hours before the attack, he sent a message to friends saying that he was planning to stab someone. Sure enough, he walked right up to Abdirahman Adam on the street and plunged a knife straight into his heart. The 22-year-old man died almost immediately. After being picked up by the police, the baby-faced killer claimed he acted in self-defense. He told the jury he believed Abdirahman was going to attack him. But in light of all the other evidence, the jury didn't find his argument very convincing. It took them just a few hours of deliberation to return a unanimous guilty verdict. As a result, Muqaddam was charged with murder and will be spending a minimum of 14 years behind bars. If you're wondering about his motive, there wasn't any that we know of. During the trial, the prosecution told the court that Muqaddam's family had already been worried their son was going down a dangerous path in life. His victim posed no threat to him at all. Muqaddam just wanted to stab somebody. 8. Babyface Nelson. On December 6, 1908, Lester Gillis was born in Chicago, Illinois. As a young man, he linked up with a gang of hoodlums to terrorize the city. And by 14, he was already a career criminal. He stole cars, he bootlegged, and he committed armed robbery, quickly earning himself the nickname Babyface Nelson due to his juvenile appearance. Even as a grown man, he had the soft facial features of an infant. But nothing about Lester Gillis was childish other than his face. He was convicted of auto theft in 1922 and was committed to a boys' home. That didn't stop him from committing more crime, though. And in 1928, he married a salesgirl named Helen Wozniak. In 1933, things really heated up when Babyface Nelson joined the legendary Dillinger Gang. The rest of Lester's life was spent committing crime, running from the police, and murdering people. The FBI tried to seize the Dillinger Gang on April 22, 1934, in northern Wisconsin while they were on vacation at the Little Bohema Lodge. But the gangsters knew what the FBI was up to and escaped under the cover of darkness. Nelson ended up shooting at 3 officers, killing Special Agent Baum. There was a lot of running, quite a bit of robbery, and more police shootings in the months that followed. John Herbert Dillinger, the leader of the gang, was finally killed on July 22, 1934. Babyface Nelson stayed on the run with his wife, who stuck by him the entire time until November 27, 1934. Nelson got into a gunfight with the FBI, resulting in the death of Special Agent Herman Edward Hollis and Inspector Cowley. Babyface Nelson was shot during the battle, but managed to stay alive until about 8:00 p.m. that evening. To this day, he's by far the most notorious baby-faced criminal in American history. 7. Jay Desborough. In 2013, Jay Desborough committed his first criminal offense at the young age of 13. He was arrested in late 2018 following a string of horrendous crimes, including stealing from his grandparents and bludgeoning a man with a bicycle helmet. He was 19 at the time of his arrest and had been living a life of crime for the past 6 years. However, between 13 and 19, Jay's face didn't change much. He had a baby face when he was an early teen, and he still had a baby face when he was going into his 20s. But just because Jay looked like a baby didn't mean he wouldn't attack you in a dark alley. Since his first offense, Jay's been convicted 12 times for 25 different crimes, and yet he was still released onto the streets to commit more. This was even after an attack in 2016 when Jay dragged a vicar from her vehicle during a robbery as she tried to leave her church service. This incident occurred in the UK, where it's not uncommon for women to be religious leaders. With help from a 13-year-old accomplice, Jay attacked Reverend Irene Wilson in the middle of the day, then left her on the street before driving off in her car. But still, after being apprehended and arrested, he was swiftly let out of jail. After Jay's most recent arrest in 2018, when he was charged for beating a man and robbing his grandparents, he was sentenced to 22 months in jail. 6. Louis Daines. Louis Daines was an 18-year-old boy with a baby face who murdered a younger teen named Breck Bednar on February 17, 2014. The pair met each other through online gaming. The day Breck was killed was the first time they were meeting in real life. Louis invited Breck over to his house in Essex, England, and shortly after his arrival, he murdered the young man. This case gained national attention when it broke because it was apparent from the get-go that Louis was a psychopath. The victim's mom had already started growing suspicious of Louis before the pair ever met. She limited her son's electronics, tried to install parental controls, and specifically forbade him from playing games with Louis. She believed that her son was beginning to change because he was influenced by the older teen. She said his ideologies were shifting, and that he quickly stopped attending church after chatting to Louis online. She even called the police in 2013 to express her concerns about grooming, as she'd believed Louis was grooming her son. But the cops said that there was nothing they could do, and several months later, her son was dead. Louis managed to convince Breck to go to his apartment, but once he arrived, he was murdered. Louis then posted pictures of what he did online, posting images of the deceased to social media. The young killer became known as the Babyface Killer because he looked way younger than he really was. But that didn't stop him from getting a life sentence in prison. 5. Miles Smith Green. In Thatcher's Close, Bristol in 2020, a babyface burglar that was armed with a knife raided a woman's home and robbed her while she slept, just a few feet from him. The woman happened to be pregnant at the time of the crime. As she slept peacefully, Miles Smith Green, a young man with juvenile features, crept past her with a kitchen knife. Miles was drinking at the time, and he also happened to be high on cannabis. But he somehow managed to get away with a cell phone, an Xbox gaming console, and a pack of cigarettes. He got away with the gaming console, but he continued searching around the woman's home with his weapon. Apparently, he created such a commotion that the woman woke up as he fled, but she thought it was her roommate. And when he tried to grab her phone, it was gone. Miles had crept right beside her bed as she slept and unplugged her phone before slipping it into his pocket. Miles was arrested shortly after, discovered by police at around 2 a.m., with a kitchen knife stuffed into the waistband of his pants. He was walking around with an Xbox controller and one of his victim's identity cards. Even with a smooth, seemingly innocent baby face, he was given 18 months behind bars for the crime. 4. The Central Park Butcher. Daphne Abdella is one of the Central Park butchers. She murdered Michael McMorrow in 1997 with her friend Christopher Vasquez in New York's Central Park. At the time, Daphne and Christopher were both 15 years old. Daphne, in particular, looked very young. With an unblemished face every old grandma would love to pinch, but underneath the baby exterior was a cold-hearted killer. She and Christopher stabbed their victim repeatedly, ripped out his guts, and then dumped him in Central Park Lake. It was all premeditated. The duo went rollerblading that night, and apparently, Daphne kept telling people that she was going to kill someone. They thought it was just a teenager being silly. After all, she looked harmless. But after a lot of heavy drinking, Daphne went through with it after stumbling upon Michael McMorrow, a man who worked as a real estate agent and lived with his senior citizen grandmother. He was frequently in the park and had encountered the young woman before. It was at this point that Daphne convinced Michael to join her at the lake. Once they got there and it was dark and private, she and Christopher killed him. Daphne and her accomplice didn't get away with their crime for very long, though. Her father called the police because she was out past her curfew. While he was on the phone with the cops, Daphne and her friend were in the basement trying to get the blood off their clothes and skin. When the police showed up and questioned them, they asked about the blood, but Daphne said they fell and hurt themselves while rollerblading. Initially, the police believed their story and left, but they returned later after receiving an anonymous tip that led them to Daphne. Both teens were arrested, and as a result of their vicious crime, each of them served 6 years in prison before being released in 2004. 3. Babyface Crime Boss. There was a babyface kingpin in England by the name of Harry O'Brien. The gang boss was only 16 years old when arrested, but he looked more like he was 12. According to local news reports, Harry was on a campaign of terror, going on gun rampages, and even fighting a war against a rival gang. He was most recently involved in a firebombing attack before being put behind bars in 2022. The babyface crime boss was such a menace to society, he was given 9.5 years in jail, finally ending his spree of violence and chaos. The police in Merseyside had their eye on Harry O'Brien ever since he was 12 years old. Even as a kid, Harry had somehow figured out a way to get people twice his age to do his bidding. He was arrested in 2017 for riding electric scooters in the street. Then he got busted smoking cannabis and was caught wielding a knife. In 2020, he landed himself in trouble for reckless driving. And although he was the head of a lucrative crime business, the cops couldn't pin anything on him. He was the mastermind behind a network of drug dealers who were all making a ton of money. He was finally arrested following the dangerous firebombing of a rival crew. The cops confiscated over $20,000 in cash from him. 2. Mateusz Maciejewski. Just because someone has a baby face that makes them look innocent doesn't mean they won't stab a grandpa to death. As we've learned today, there are a lot of babyface maniacs roaming the world. Mateusz Maciejewski, a recently convicted murderer, is just one of them. He supposedly killed a grandfather at the victim's home in Derbyshire over a pair of beer cans. Mateusz, who was 20 years old when this unfolded in December of 2019, was trying to be a vigilante. The grandfather, Carl Taylor, had taken 2 beer cans from a nearby convenience store without paying for them. So the babyface murderer followed Carl to his home, confronted him about the theft, and then stabbed him multiple times. Mateusz struck the man in the leg and the abdomen, then phoned an ambulance and ran away. The attack was definitely not premeditated. It was a rash act of vigilantism that went horribly wrong. But the babyface killer made all the wrong moves. He texted his girlfriend saying that the police would never catch him because nobody would ever snitch on him. He stopped using his phone after that, disposed of the murder weapon, and tried to hide. However, he was apprehended when cops found him. Judge Nirmal Shant then found him guilty of murder and sentenced him to life in prison. 1. Cameron Strempel. In 2013, Chandler police in Arizona arrested a man after he went on a flashing rampage. The man was identified as Cameron Strempel. He was described by his victims as a young man with the face of a baby. Thanks to multiple eyewitness descriptions, detectives were able to complete a composite sketch of the Babyface flasher. They then took the sketch around to apartment complexes in the area where the flashings had occurred. It wasn't long before the flasher's neighbors gave him away to the authorities. He'd revealed himself to at least 10 women, potentially more, who never reported him to the police. The flasher's insane rampage lasted from between January and May of 2013. For 5 months, he was allowed to run around his neighborhood, flashing victims aged between 6 and 60. Chandler police finally arrested Cameron and charged him with 2 felonies and 6 misdemeanors. He appeared to be in his 20s, although he had the face of a young child. He looked harmless, right up until he opened his trench coat.
Number 8. Magdalena Kralka. A beautiful Polish crime boss who's described by police as highly dangerous was hunted down by Interpol in 2019 and 2020. Magdalena Kralka, a woman from Krakow in Poland's southern region, is a member of a criminal gang supposedly connected to the football hooligans called the Cracovia. Kralka wasn't just a member though, she was allegedly the gang's second-in-command. It's believed that she ran a 2-year campaign of terror in the tourist city, running extortion rackets, trafficking drugs, and carrying out brutal attacks on rivals. In 2017, one of Cracovia's leaders, Kralka, was rumored to be in a relationship with, was shot and killed by anti-terror police officers. In response, hooligan Adrian Zielona and 6 other gang members kidnapped a man and viciously beat him, breaking his kneecaps and almost strangling him to death. Those involved were arrested and Zielona was killed in the process. The man's death allowed Kralka to take over as the gang's number 2. She then concentrated her energy on the group's finances and focusing on brokering drug smuggling deals from Spain. A police raid in 2018 led Kralka, who's nicknamed the Queen of the South, to escape and set up a criminal organization of her own. In 2019, the police stated that the new gang was responsible for smuggling about 65 kilos of cocaine and marijuana onto the black market. According to investigators, the female crime boss set up her group after deciding to take care of her fellow gang members that hadn't yet been caught by the police. Based on reports, Kralka was captured by law enforcement in February of 2020 after sneaking into Slovakia in the back of a car. She was supposed to return to Poland to face charges against her, including making false statements, obstructing justice, and drug trafficking. But there haven't been any updates on the case since 2020. For all we know, Kralka could be back on the streets, leading her criminal organization from the shadows. Number 7. Melissa La China Calderon. In 2015, Mexico's most notorious female crime boss was handed over to the authorities by her second-in-command, who was also her former lover. Pedro El Chino Gomez traded inside information with the police after getting picked up by officers, according to some reports. He apparently told the cops that his partner and boss, Melissa La China Calderon, had suddenly become a control freak, acting maniacally. His story was supported by the fact that she was rumored to have kidnapped a few of her enemies, who she killed before dumping the bodies on their loved ones' doorsteps. Gomez revealed the woman's secret burial pits in Mexico in exchange for a reduced sentence. La China first got involved in organized crime back in 2005 when she joined the Damaso cartel and moved up the ranks. She was promoted to commander of the group's armed wing after only 3 years, which is when she started running a criminal empire that stretched to La Paz, the capital of the Mexican state of Baja California Sur. During her 7-year reign, murders in the area supposedly tripled. It's been said that La China even handed out bags of cocaine as prizes to her favorite henchmen, and she enjoyed posing for pictures with various weapons. Several images of the woman are online, with many of them showing her holding massive guns in each hand. She supposedly left the cartel in June of 2015 after being asked to step down in favor of Abel Quintero, who had recently gotten out of prison. This was when she announced her plan to start her own crime syndicate, taking several high-ranking gang leaders with her. It's believed that she controlled over 300 drug dealers who all rode red motorcycles through the streets of Mexico. But when her boyfriend gave her up to the police, La China was arrested at the Cabo San Lucas airport while trying to flee from the authorities. It's unclear what consequences she faced after her arrest. Number 6. Fulan Devi. Fulan Devi was born in India and had a rough childhood. It's been reported that her family hated her, and at just 10 years old she was knocked unconscious by her uncle. He hit her with a brick for saying that he stole her father's land. The same uncle then married her off to a 45-year-old man. But somehow she made her way home 2 years later. But since she was no longer a virgin, her mother told her to jump into a well and drown. When she didn't follow her mom's instructions, her evil uncle hired some local bandits to take her away for good. While in captivity, Fulan would have faced a lifetime of sexual abuse if it wasn't for her unlikely savior, a bandit named Bikram Singh, who shot and killed the leader of the group. Afterward, Fulan and Singh began a romance, but it was short-lived since Singh was eventually murdered. As a result, Fulan was locked up in a village. When she escaped, she gathered a group of people and took her own revenge. On Valentine's Day in 1981, while dressed in blue jeans, boots, a khaki police coat, and lipstick, she marched her followers to the village with a gun and ammo slung over her shoulders. She demanded to know where her captors were. The villagers claimed not to know, so she killed all of the 30 men she'd confronted by lining them up and shooting them one by one. This earned her the title of the most wanted person in India, setting her bounty at $10,000. 2 years later, though, at just 20 years old, she turned herself in to the police after setting strict conditions beforehand. She agreed that nobody from her gang would receive the death penalties for their crimes. By this time, she'd already earned the love of the Indian public, and a total of 8,000 people gathered at Fulan's hideout to see her surrender. She was sentenced to serve 8 years in prison, but she ended up spending over 10 years behind bars. During this time, she suffered from tuberculosis and was diagnosed with stomach tumors. In 1994, all the charges against her were dropped by order of the central government of Mulayam Singh Yadav. And amazingly, after her release from prison, she got into politics and was elected a member of parliament for Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh as a member of the Samajwadi Party. Sadly, she was killed in 2001 outside of her home in New Delhi at just 37 years old during a revenge attack by a man named Sher Singh Rana. Number 5. Cocaine Godmother. Griselda Blanco Restrepo, or the Cocaine Grandmother, was born in Cartagena, Colombia in 1943. At just 3 years old, Griselda and her abusive mom moved to one of the most dangerous cities in the world, Medellin. She started working in prostitution and crime at an early age, and by 11 she'd already kidnapped and killed a boy from a rich family. But she didn't start trafficking cocaine to the US until she met her second husband, Alberto Bravo, during the early 1970s. After marrying Bravo, Griselda and her 3 sons moved to Queens, New York to start a new life of crime. Through the couple's connections in Colombia, they started importing cocaine into the city. According to the DEA agent Steve George, who spoke with the Sun Sentinel newspaper in 1989, Griselda was one of the first crime bosses to use multiple supply sources, so in his words, she could always keep the cocaine pipeline full. She was also apparently the first to pool the shipments and consolidate the loads, eventually leading to the evolution of the infamous Colombian cartel. Griselda and Bravo's criminal group eventually grew so big that the couple was indicted in 1975 with 39 other people as part of a joint DEA-NYPD task force called Operation Banshee. But unfortunately for the police, the couple had already fled back to their home country by the time the feds came looking for them. The woman's crime spree lasted another 10 years after this, but in 1985, she was finally apprehended in California. While Griselda was in custody, prosecutors charged her with 3 counts of murder, but their case quickly fell apart. Even from behind bars, Griselda was alleged to have run her drug enterprise. When she was released from prison in 2004 after serving 20 years, she was deported back to Colombia. Then, in 2012, as Griselda was leaving a butcher shop in Medellin, an unknown assassin on a motorcycle shot her in the head, instantly ending her life. She was 69 years old at the time of her death and had been living quietly in the country since being deported 8 years earlier. But in the end, what comes around goes around, and many found it ironic that the woman was killed in the same way so many of her victims had. Number 4. Shaiza and Abia Din. Two sisters from the UK ran a multi-million-dollar drug ring from their Manchester-based beauty business and were forced to pay back most of their ill-gotten gains in 2022. 44-year-old Shazia Din and her older sister, 47-year-old Abia Din, ran a front company called the Beauty Booth in Bury as a money laundering operation. The pair were apparently funneling heroin, amphetamines, and cocaine to their contacts in South Yorkshire behind the scenes. During a hearing at Manchester Crown Court, the police told the judge that they'd confiscated £345,031 from several individuals that helped organize the crime. This happened back in December of 2020, when 17 people were arrested after the authorities smashed a cross-Pennine drug ring, ultimately seizing the cash and over 60 kilos of cocaine and heroin. Shazia and Abia eventually pled guilty to conspiracy to convert and transfer criminal property and conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. They also entered guilty pleas for the charge of intent to supply Class B drugs like cannabis. As a result, Shazia was given a 15-year sentence while Abia got 18 years behind bars. It wasn't until 2022 that the sisters were hit by confiscation orders under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Shazia, who was the original mastermind behind the criminal empire, had £259,079 confiscated, and Abia lost around £49,478. Number 3. Nunzia D'Amico. In 2015, Nunzia D'Amico was hit with a spray of bullets in an eastern suburb of Naples, only 15 feet from her front door. She probably looked like any ordinary mother. She pushed her baby around in a carriage, but her true story was a lot darker. At the time, the woman's brothers, Antonio, Giuseppe, and Salvatore, were known heads of the notorious D'Amico clan and had been arrested for their crimes. But the thing is, Nunzia was believed to be the one actually in charge. Because of this, she was assassinated by members of a rival gang as part of the city's horrific drug war. Gaetano Lauria, who worked as an informant and was accused of mob-related murder, told the authorities that Nunzia, who had a conviction for drug trafficking, was the leader of the criminal family business. Her death emphasized what prosecutors in Italy had been saying for a long time. Women are starting to take over mafia groups as their brothers and husbands are imprisoned. Experts have estimated that there are almost 10 times as many female gangsters and mobsters in Italy than there were 20 years ago. And surprisingly, female crime bosses are known to be more cynical and violent than men. Number 2. Raquel de Oliveira. Raquel de Oliveira was sold to a brothel by her grandmother as a young girl, and by age 11, she'd already been given her first gun by a crime lord godfather. At just 15 years old, she'd already killed a man in cold blood. All this and more happened in the years leading up to Oliveira running a vicious Brazilian cocaine cartel. When her lover and the leader of the cocaine cartel, Ednaldo de Souza, was killed during a police shootout in 1988, she took over his position in the organization. Once she rose to power, she started burying her enemies alive and shooting rival gang members who wandered onto her turf. But after becoming addicted to the drug herself, she lost everything. Oliveira, who's now in her 60s, has chosen to leave behind crime and has agreed to lift the lid on the underground world of murder, sex, and drugs that corrupts Rio de Janeiro today. She describes the brutal realities she was forced to face in the book she wrote about her life called A Número which translates from Spanish to Number 1. All that remains of her cocaine boss career now are her memories and her addiction. According to her, she spent almost everything she had on drugs, even carrying out a robbery just to blow the money she earned on cocaine. Number 1. The Big Female Kitten. Raffaella Del Tiero, a woman called the Italian Godmother and the Big Female Kitten, led a criminal clan in Italy until her arrest in June 2012. Raffaella and 65 other suspects were apprehended during a series of dawn raids conducted by armed officers who used helicopters and trained police canines. The authorities in Naples revealed that they'd impounded a red Ferrari with a solid gold license plate during the operation, which had been gifted to the boyfriend of Raffaella's daughter, Caterina. Officers also confirmed that Caterina and one of Raffaella's other daughters, Costanza, were also arrested during the raids. In total, about $12 million worth of properties and cars were seized. Apparently, Raffaella took over as the head of the criminal organization when her husband, Nicola Pianese, was shot to death by rivals 6 years before her infamous arrest. She suffered gunshot wounds herself 3 years later when she was targeted by rival mobsters who'd grown jealous of her control over Naples' drug cartels. Raffaella was held on charges of extortion, drug trafficking, mafia association, and violation of the Arms Act. But it's suspiciously difficult to find any information on what happened after she was taken into custody.
Anthony Reyes. In early 2021, footage of a yellow school bus ramming recklessly into vehicles in Brooklyn went viral on social media while the incident was still in progress. The driver, later identified by police as 43-year-old Anthony Reyes, allegedly stole the bus and led law enforcement on a wild chase through multiple precincts. Early on in the pursuit, officers tried to pry the bus doors open, but Reyes resisted. They tried to tase him, but it didn't work, and he sped off toward Queens, hitting multiple vehicles along the way. Reyes continued the chase for as long as possible, and with what seemed like relentless determination. Even after crashing into the building, he kept going, and he tried not to let a traffic jam stop him either. Witness Ali Suleiman Al-Mawari told local station WABC that Reyes struck every single car on one block, and that if officers hadn't pulled one woman from her vehicle before the bus hit it, she would have died. In one video, the bus could be seen alternating between forward and reverse as it rammed into anything in its path while officers shouted at nearby motorists to stay in their cars. Police eventually caught up with Reyes and arrested him on suspicion of grand larceny, reckless endangerment, forgery, unauthorized use of a vehicle, criminal possession of stolen property, obstruction of governmental authority, resisting arrest, and leaving the scene of an accident with injury. The suspect had been arrested at least 12 times before, including for a robbery in 2017, and was on parole at the time of the bus theft. While Reyes certainly caused a lot of damage, the outcome could have been much worse considering the circumstances of the incident. Thankfully, there were no children on the bus during the terrifying ordeal, and the police officers involved only suffered minor injuries. 11. Cocaine-fueled getaway attempt. In late August 2022, headlines around the world reported on a white Mazda that somehow ended up stuck on the staircase of a subway station in Madrid. According to the press, a 36-year-old man stole the vehicle from a nearby parking lot. During his attempt to flee from police, he entered the station through a bus lane and broke down its doors on his way in. It's unclear whether the driver ended up in the station by accident or if he purposefully meant to go there. The car became stuck as the alleged thief tried to drive it up the staircase. Unable to open the door because the railing was in the way, he was stuck inside the vehicle, bringing his joyride to an unceremonious and bizarre end. He tested positive for cocaine use and was subsequently arrested. It was reported that firefighters worked for 2 hours to get the car up the stairs and out of the station. 10. Andrew Abdullah. When 25-year-old Andrew Abdullah was caught driving a stolen car in New York City in May of 2022, it was already apparent to authorities that he was a repeat offender. The young man had been locked up at least 3 times since 2020 on pending cases, but he seemed to find his way to freedom one way or another each time. Abdullah was released from Rikers Island jail on a gang conspiracy case in late 2019, but was caught with a gun early the next year. He was locked back up for a few months until a relative posted enough of his $300,000 bail to get him out of jail. Sure enough, he got arrested again shortly after his release, this time for domestic violence. For whatever reason, instead of staying behind bars this time, he was put on supervised release and sent home. Several of these cases were still open when he was accused of stealing the car. The prosecutor urged Brooklyn criminal court judge Lei Cheng to set Abdullah's bail at $15,000, citing his lengthy list of pending charges. But Cheng freed the defendant on supervised release because he'd never missed a court appearance. According to a transcript of the court hearing obtained by the New York Daily News, Judge Cheng said that Abdullah's history of showing up in court overwhelmingly favored his release. In all reality, the judge's leniency could have been Abdullah's chance to prove that he can be a functioning member of society. But just a few weeks after being cut loose following the stolen car arrest, he allegedly gunned down a complete stranger on a subway in Lower Manhattan. 48-year-old Daniel Henriquez was on his way to have brunch with a friend when he was shot to death in cold blood on the Q train in what appears to be an unprovoked and random attack. As he lay dying in the train, the shooter told nearby passengers to put their phones away and to get off at the next stop. Afterward, he fled the scene, ditching the murder weapon and some of his clothes along the way. Abdullah is now being held without bail on a murder charge, although his public defender implied that authorities arrested the wrong man at one of his hearings. The case appears to be ongoing. 9. Tow truck thief. For more than an hour, one evening in October 2021, a man driving a stolen tow truck led police on an extremely slow chase from Pacific Beach to downtown San Diego, never exceeding 10 miles per hour. During the 10-mile pursuit, the driver told a police dispatcher over the phone that he couldn't stop the truck because there was a bomb in it, and it would explode if the truck didn't keep moving. The claim was reminiscent of the 1994 movie Speed, starring Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, who were among a group of passengers on a public bus that they were told would blow up if it went below 50 miles per hour. Except this was a much more sluggish adventure, and there was no real bomb threat in the end. Hilarious footage showed the truck nonchalantly rolling along while several police cars trailed right behind it, with their lights and sirens on full blast. Police finally got the truck to stop by using spike strips, but the driver was reluctant to exit the vehicle when he was ordered to do so. In the video, officers could be seen pelting the inside of the truck with pepper balls until the stubborn suspect was forced out. He exited with his hands up and was subsequently taken into custody without incident. 8. Locked inside stolen car. A newlywed bride from Seattle loaned her BMW to a friend the day after her wedding in 2016 and awoke to find it missing. After using the car, her friend had parked it in her driveway and left the key inside, but had forgotten to lock the doors. She called the police, who got in touch with BMW's roadside assistance program and located the vehicle's whereabouts. Then, BMW employees remotely locked the car. When police arrived at the scene, they found a 38-year-old man trapped inside. He allegedly found the vehicle with the key in it the night before and took it for a joyride before pulling over to take a nap. As a result, the unnamed suspect was charged with auto theft and drug possession for a small amount of methamphetamine that was found on him. 7. Brandy Jones. 41-year-old Brandy Jones already had 2 convictions for car theft under her belt when she was arrested for allegedly stealing another vehicle in Dublin, California in early 2022. She showed up at her court hearing a few days later in what appeared to be yet another stolen car and was promptly arrested and taken back to jail. Apparently unamused by the suspect's behavior, the Dublin police posted a tweet warning members of the public not to show up at court in a stolen vehicle if you're already in hot water over that exact same crime. They likely meant that it's always a bad idea to steal a car, but that it's especially foolish to pull a move like Jones was accused of doing. 6. Brittany Muldrew. Just 10 days after being released from the Palm Beach County, Florida jail on a pending petty theft charge in 2021, 36-year-old Brittany Muldrew was pulled over for speeding in a stolen Mercedes-Benz. The officer who made the traffic stop called for backup, and 2 more cops reported to the scene. While the 3 officers were talking behind the car, Muldrew threw it into reverse and hit the gas, heading straight toward them. 2 of the cops shot at the car, and at least one of the bullets struck Muldrew. They tried to revive her, but she died from her injuries. 49-year-old Levon Lopez, who was riding in the passenger seat, was unharmed. He was charged with grand theft auto in connection with the alleged theft. According to police, gas station surveillance footage showed Lopez and Muldrew getting into the car, which the owner had left running, before speeding away. Authorities also charged Lopez with murder in connection with Muldrew's death. Under Florida law, his involvement in the car theft meant that he could face charges for any crimes that happened afterward. The 3 cops and a canine were reportedly hurt in the incident, but were expected to recover. 5. Carlos Bryant. A cyclist in San Jose, California, narrowly avoided being hit by a stolen Porsche Cayenne SUV as it barreled through a red light one day in early 2022. The out-of-control vehicle T-boned a smaller car at high speed and spun out of control, coming dangerously close to the unnamed cyclist before crashing into a fence. Footage of the collision shows what appears to be the SUV brushing one of the bike's tires as the rider sped away. The SUV driver, 53-year-old Carlos Bryant, was allegedly trying to flee from the police when the accident occurred. According to the San Jose Police Department, the SUV had been reported stolen 2 years earlier after a pair of thieves carjacked it from its owner. Bryant wasn't suspected of being the carjacker, but he was charged with possession of a stolen vehicle and reckless driving. 4. Bradford Weitzel. After leaving a bar in West Palm Beach, Florida, one night in early 2022, 38-year-old Bradford Weitzel allegedly stole a car and got it stuck on some railroad tracks in the path of an oncoming train. He abandoned the vehicle just seconds before the train crashed into it and sent it crashing into a nearby home. The homeowners were jolted awake by the impact of the car hitting the side of their house. Thankfully, though, they were uninjured. According to the Martin County Sheriff's Office, Weitzel then tried to steal a forklift from a nearby fruit stand, but he damaged that vehicle too and quickly ditched the idea. He then flagged down deputies that were responding to the train crash to let them know he was still searching for his car. During questioning, Weitzel reportedly told law enforcement that he stole the car in a good faith effort to find his own vehicle because he couldn't remember where it was. As a result, Weitzel was booked on charges of grand theft auto and criminal mischief, with the expectation that more charges would be brought against him following an investigation. 3. Bandit makes a run for it. One morning in early 2020, police received reports about 2 women who were seen shoplifting at a Metro grocery store in Oakville, Ontario. The suspects allegedly fled the scene in a stolen vehicle and went to nearby Burlington, where they assaulted a woman outside a gas station and stole her car. They sped off as officers chased after the vehicle before ditching the car and attempting to flee on foot. But it didn't take long for the cops to tackle them to the ground and arrest them. Just an hour after receiving calls about the women, the police had them in custody. The pair were hit with multiple theft charges, possession of property obtained by crime, flight from police, and dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. 2. Daryl Lamont Smith. A country store owner in Davidsonville, Maryland, encountered a major unexpected headache in 2019 when a stolen car rammed into their business at a high speed and destroyed a large portion of the storefront. The crash happened in the middle of the night, and thankfully nobody was inside at the time. Police arrived to find the entire vehicle in the building. The driver, 44-year-old Daryl Lamont Smith, was unable to get out of the car on his own. It took emergency responders an hour and a half to remove him from the wreckage. Smith was airlifted to the hospital with possibly life-threatening injuries, and authorities said he would likely face charges pending the outcome of an investigation. Officers reportedly found a vial of what appeared to be drugs in the car. The store's manager, Zahir Ahmed, told the Capital Gazette that the car came to rest on top of the cash register. He said that it would take between 2 and 4 weeks to fix the damage to the building. 1. Essence Hoto. After spotting a little red Hyundai driving erratically one day in 2022, a deputy in Collier County, Florida, pulled the vehicle over. In the driver's seat was 23-year-old Sensei Hutto, who claimed that she was running errands. By then, the deputies had run the license plate number and saw that the vehicle had recently been reported stolen. He phoned Hutto's mother, who said that her homeless daughter had disappeared with the car while over at her house doing laundry, and that she wanted to press charges. The young woman repeatedly denied having any drugs on her, but was caught with a white powdery substance hidden in her skirt during a strip search at the local jail. In accordance with her mother's wishes, authorities charged Hutto with grand theft auto, possession of a controlled substance, and smuggling controlled substances into a correctional facility. Would you rather have your car stolen only to have it reappear a month later in the same condition it was in before the theft, or have your car not get stolen but wake up to find it keyed and your windows and tail lights smashed out? Let us know in the comments below. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.